What's up everyone, Professor Leis here. In this video, I want to walk you through the prompt for major essay project number 2. So let's go ahead and get started. In an essay of at least 4 full pages, identify a local group within the college or community that you have never been a member of, but may be interested in joining. Once you have chosen a group, you will identify and analyze both a meaningful value that the group holds in common and the way the group demonstrates that shared value. So let's parse this out a little bit. To add some context, in our first major essay projects, we are examining a value that we ourselves hold and examining or analyzing how our personal experiences and history influence and contribute to that value. Now we're turning our attention outward. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for a local group, such as a club or an organization, either at the college, so something that's put on by students at the college, an official club of the college, or something in your community. So if you don't want to look at something at the college, something in your community, in your neighborhood or the city, something that you could potentially join. So keep in mind, you don't want it to be a group that you're already a member of. One of the purposes of this is to practice good research, and in order to do that, we want to make sure that we have a lot of things to figure out, right? So make sure it's a group that you're not already a member of, but it should be a group that you are interested in. You could see yourself being a member of it. So think about your interests. What do you care about in the world? So you could go back to that value you focused on in major essay project number 1. So you might say, okay, well, what type of group might share that value? And then you can go from there. Or you could do it the other way. Maybe you're just cruising through the lists of clubs and whatnot on campus, and you see one that focuses on something that you care about, and then from there you kind of analyze what the shared value is, right? So just as we did in major essay project number 1, we're not trying to look for a whole bunch of different values. We're trying to identify one single unifying value that the members of this group hold in common, okay? So that could be a whole host of different types of values, right? That's up to you to determine that. And then what you're going to do, you're going to analyze how the activities that the group participates in, the events that they attend or put on, all the different workings of the group, how those demonstrate the value that you are identifying that the members hold in common. Now, of course, I understand this is a little bit different right now because we are in a pandemic, right? And so we can't, groups aren't doing their normal social activities and whatnot, but you can still find stuff on the internet either through the college's website, social media, or just doing some good old-fashioned Googling, right? But you're going to need to look up stuff about this group, right? Part of this, again, is research. We're researching this particular group, okay? So let's go ahead and continue on here. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this term. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers. Try something new and exciting. Follow your curiosity, take risks, and attempt to have fun while composing this essay. So one of the familiar habits that we might need to resist is falling into that 5-paragraph essay structure, right? So we're moving beyond that essay structure. So we want to try to resist the habits that were formed from learning that essay structure, right? And some of the practices as writers is to kind of wait to the last minute to crank out a draft. I'm going to recommend that you don't do that. Spread the work out, right? A little bit each day goes a lot more smoothly and effectively than saving it all till 10 o'clock, the night the draft is due, right? So resist those practices if those are your familiar practices. Try something new and exciting. I'm encouraging you guys to take risks in your writing. Ultimately, that's one of the ways we learn, by trying new things and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't, then we try something else, right? And of course, we want to try to have fun while composing this essay. So that's why it's really important that you choose a group that you care about, something that centers around an interest that you enjoy. So if that's comic books, great, that's excellent. If it's archery, awesome. If it's community service, maybe it's something that distributes food to homeless people, excellent. Whatever the case is, make sure that it's something you care about. But again, we want to make sure that it's a group that we're not a part of already. So let's continue here. We're going to take a look at the challenges for this essay. Many of these will be familiar from major essay project number 1, but we're slightly building on them as we progress to this next essay project. For this major essay project, we are challenged to write an essay with a coherent and purposeful structure and organization that resists the limiting nature of the 5-paragraph essay, employing strategies we learned in On Structure from Habits of the Creative Mind. Now, just a note here, this is something that was causing a little bit of confusion I noticed in major essay project number 1, so I want to clarify. I'm not saying that you should quote from Habits of the Creative Mind, okay? What I'm saying is that we want to take the strategies that we're learning from Habits of the Creative Mind and apply them to our writing. So in this case, On Structure deals with purposeful structure and organization. So what did you learn from that essay from Habits of the Creative Mind that you can apply to the writing of this essay project? So we did some activities when we were working on major essay project number 1. After we wrote our first draft, we did that activity where you used index cards or post-it notes or cut out pieces of paper where you sectioned off the parts that you already had in your essay, and then you needed to project into the future a little bit. What do you still need to work on or include in your essay? And you put those on cards that you were then able to rearrange and kind of think about different ways of structuring your essay. That's one of the strategies that you learned in that process that came from this section on structure, right? So use that strategy. Use that to help you think about the organization a little bit. And that's a really good method of doing so. Professional writers do that. That's why Miller and Jurecic talk about it, and they use those professional writers as examples. We're challenged to include specific and relevant examples and textual evidence that help develop a central point. So the central point is making sure that we're addressing the prompt, right? Now, we need to have specific and relevant examples included in our essay to help stick to that point. So we need to have specifics about what this group does that would demonstrate this shared value, and how does that work. Textual evidence, because you're going to want to practice incorporating quotations, and so some things that you can include as far as quotations go are information that might be included on the group's website or webpage or social media presence. Or you might actually reach out to the group. Maybe you can reach out to the leader of this group or a member of this group to conduct an interview. And you can include some of that information to help you develop that point, right? But the key is we want to be specific, and we want to make sure our examples are relevant, and we want to begin to practice incorporating quotations. So that leads to this next challenge. We're challenged to integrate quotations effectively using signal phrases and providing context for our readers. So to integrate something means that we incorporate it in a way where it seems to fit, right? It seems to belong there. So that's what we mean when we integrate something. It coheres to the overall structure. It seems to belong. So we want to make sure that we are making our quotations belong in our essay by using signal phrases to introduce them. So a common signal phrase would be X states, or according to so-and-so, as so-and-so argues. Those things help to lead into quotations. They kind of serve as transitions, but also they give your reader a heads up that a quotation is coming, and they indicate who's saying that quote. That stuff's important. We also want to make sure that we're providing context for our readers. Don't just throw a quotation in there and not give your reader a heads up of what that quotation is referring to, because if you don't provide that context, your reader is going to be confused, right? What the heck does that quotation mean? What's it referring to? We want to give some background information or context for our readers. We're challenged to write at least 7 purposeful and organized paragraphs each one focusing on a distinct point or idea that helps develop the overall point of the essay. So this is a key phrase here. It says at least, meaning minimum, but you can write more. In fact, I encourage you to do that, to write more. That's always the case, whether it's paragraphs or page numbers, page length, I always encourage you to write more, but whatever I list is a minimum. So here's a minimum. We want to have a minimum of 7 paragraphs, but you can write more, and this is a mechanism to help us break out of the 5-paragraph essay structure. If we can't have 5 paragraphs, then I can't be a strictly 5-paragraph essay, right? But we want to make sure that we are using our paragraphs in a purposeful way. Each paragraph should focus on a main idea or help to develop a single point or a single aspect of a point. You can break, if there's a point you have that has several aspects, you can break each of those aspects into different paragraphs. That's okay, but we want to make sure that each paragraph has a central idea that it's focusing on. It has a job to do. Now, continuing on with paragraphs, we're challenged to treat paragraphs as a unified progression of ideas rather than disconnected items in a list. So what I mean by this is we want to think of our paragraphs as a chain of meaning. Each paragraph is a link in that chain, right? So each link should connect to the one before it and the one after it in a way that makes sense. So a unified progression of ideas means that as we read, we gain a greater understanding and we work our way to greater meaning with our essay. If we're treating our points as disconnected items in a list, it means that we don't show how one paragraph connects to the one that came before it or the one that comes after it. We're just kind of putting them in there like they're bullet points, kind of like this, bullet point style. That's what I call the listing effect. You've probably heard me use that term or seen me use that term, the listing effect. If we're treating them as disconnected items in a list, that's the listing effect. We want to avoid that. Instead, we want to treat our paragraphs as a unified progression of ideas. We're challenged to show a strong awareness of our audience, i.e. our readers, right? So what this means is we want to make sure that we're anticipating the expectations or meeting the expectations of our audience. What do they expect from us? What kind of information do they expect from us? But also making sure that we're being attentive to their needs. What do you think they need to know in order for something to make sense to them? You want to make sure that you're imagining what your audience members might need from you as the writer, but also keeping in mind the context for which you're writing this or in which you're writing this. We are in an academic setting. That means that we need to treat our essays as a piece of academic work, right? That doesn't mean it should be boring and overly serious. That's not what we mean by that. But it means that we're treating the ideas seriously so that our readers will treat those ideas seriously, right? So we call that our rhetorical situation. What's the context we find ourselves in? Why are we writing this and who are we writing it for, right? We're challenged to have a conclusion that does not simply summarize the main point, but instead addresses the so what question. So some questions that go along with that are, why do these ideas matter? What's the overall significance? What can the reader take away from this essay? So for this particular essay project, you're focusing on a club or an organization, and you're analyzing the value, a key value that the members share, and how they demonstrate that value in the work or activities that they do, right? So you might think in your conclusion why this is important. Why are groups like this important? Even if it's something that seems kind of silly, like, maybe it's a group that focuses on manga appreciation, that still serves an important purpose for that community, right? So what is that? You might touch on that in your conclusion. We're challenged to create a purposeful title that alludes to the focus of the essay. So this is important. Don't throw your titles away. Titles matter, okay? So think consciously about your title. What can you title it that's creative, that's going to capture your reader's attention, but also is going to hint at what the focus of your essay is. Don't just call it something random. It should have a very specific purpose. And you might think about it this way. It's the very first thing that your reader is going to read, right? So it should be something that will spark a little bit of an interest from them. We're challenged to show ownership and pride over our work, taking care to eliminate major or distracting spelling, grammatical, and typographical errors. So I've mentioned this before. Whether we like it or not, the work we put into the world is a representation of us. So we want to make sure that it's a good representation. So one way to do that is to take responsibility for the things that we produce by showing our readers that we cared for it, right? And so one way to do that is to polish it up, make sure that we're proofreading, we're taking care to eliminate these major distracting spelling, grammatical, typographical errors. One way to do this, an effective way of proofreading, is to read out loud. And I don't mean just kind of whisper to yourself. I mean read it like I'm talking right now. Read it out loud so you can hear how it sounds. That's something that we often forget. Language was first spoken before it was written, so it should sound good. If something doesn't sound good, maybe there's something there that needs a little bit more attention, right? But please, I want you to take pride and ownership over the work you produce, because that's a representation of you, especially if it's an essay. We're challenged to format our essays according to MLA guidelines. So that's 12-point Times New Roman font, double-spaced the entire document, so not adding additional spaces between paragraphs or between our title and our main text. Double-space the entire document, and our margins on all 4 sides should be only 1 inch. Not 1.5 inches, not 2 inches, only 1 inch. Okay? And then, of course, we're going to need a properly formatted works cited page, because we're going to be incorporating textual evidence from either the group's website or their social media presence, or if it was an interview that you conducted either by phone or Zoom or email, you still need to cite those things. I'll provide you with resources in order to do that. Now, our due dates for this project, our first draft is due Sunday, the 11th of October, and that's 2 full pages via Canvas by midnight on Sunday, the 11th of October. Okay, so that's coming up. Draft 2, let's do a week later, Sunday, the 18th. That's 3 full pages. Same method, you'll send it through Canvas in the Turnitin app, just as you did with the drafts for Major Essay Project 1. And then the polished draft is due Sunday, the 25th of October, and that will be the full 4 pages, right? Now, again, you can write more than that, but it needs to be a minimum of 4 full pages. Not 3.5, not 3 3/4, 4 full pages. Now, keep in mind, just as we did for Major Essay Project number 1, we need to submit all 3 drafts in order for this essay project to be considered complete. Okay, so you can't skip a draft. You can't submit only draft 1 and then skip draft 2 and then submit your polished draft, or any combination of that. All 3 drafts must be submitted in order for this project to be considered complete. Now, if you can't meet a specific deadline, I would like to refer you to the project deadlines and submissions policy in the syllabus. I've also created an announcement about this, something that you need to know and you need to begin to take seriously, because I'm not going to be accepting any late work if you don't make those arrangements with me ahead of time. Okay? All right, y'all. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. Happy writing.